So you checked in to see what the latest is in the news. Well, the news is pretty much the same, but it's escalating. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. At the moment, channel growth is quite slow. YouTube seems to be, well, getting rid of YouTube longs for some reason. Everything's about the short attention span these days. So if you don't share this video with friends, it doesn't really get circulated. So please circulate this video with your friends. So let's check in on the Middle East. Well, the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran has continued to escalate across the Middle East. Now, the South African government, being retarded, has said that all three countries have breached the UN Charter through the use of force. And this is obviously after Iran has bombed, well, pretty much everybody. Now, the US and Israeli strikes on Iran, supposedly, according to the South African government, violate Article 2-4 of the UN Charter. And Iran's retaliatory strikes on regional targets exceed lawful self-defense under Article 51. The South African government has warned that the conflict risks wider regional war and calls for diplomatic de-escalation. And all I've got to say to that is, and what are you tools going to do about it? Like, you couldn't negotiate a piss up in a brewery. Now, Iran's Assembly of Experts have reportedly appointed the new ayatollah, who happens to be the son of the last supreme leader. Now, the new son of the last supreme leader, the late supreme leader, is aligned with Iran's hardline faction. So basically, it's more of the same. They've got his son to replace him, and he's, according to the news, more extreme than his dad. Now, there's something in this that we really need to talk about. And that is, in the 1970s, the Ayatollah promised to go into Iran and get rid of the monarchy. Now, the reason they were going to get rid of the monarchy was to get democracy, freedom, representation, and get rid of the aristocracy, the blood inheritance, which monarchical type figures seem to get, where your son takes over as the future king and so forth. All these promises were made of how Iran was going to be a revolutionary new Islamic state, and it would be all forms of freedom and love and joy. And you know what? That's not what happened at all. In fact, Iran, having got the Ayatollah, got more repression than it had ever had before. And now we're seeing that this supreme leader is nothing more than a new monarchical dynasty. So effectively, they lied. Now, why this is interesting and why it's relevant for us is because this is what happened in South Africa. The ANC said that they wanted power. They wanted to get rid of all forms of prejudice. They wanted to get rid of all forms of race legislation and hatred in the country and have prosperity for all those who live in it, and then adopted more race laws than the previous government did. So what we're seeing is that a lot of these revolutionaries are, well, frankly, liars, and that it has nothing to do with their principles and has everything to do with taking over the levers of power. And once in the positions of levers of power, they do exactly what the last guys did. So they're no better than what you had before. Now, the Iranian military leadership and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard have all pledged allegiance to him. And at the time of recording, so has Hezbollah. Hezbollah has publicly pledged allegiance to him. Now, Donald Trump has suggested that the new Iranian Ayatollah isn't going to last that long, and once they know where he is, they're going to bomb him. Now, oil prices have risen to over $100 per barrel, which is all due to the escalating conflict in the Middle East. So what does that actually mean for us? Well, according to the latest report, petrol is expected to go up to 25 Rand a litre. And this is a worldwide thing. All countries around the world are suggesting that there may be fuel shortages and that the cost is going to become pretty high. Now, turning our attention slightly abroad, because the reports claim that Russia has provided intelligence assistance to Iran during the conflict. Now, if you watched my video yesterday, I told you that this was the case. It's now just been solidified in the legacy media, but we already knew that. Saying that, whilst they're giving intelligence, that's all they're really giving. Intelligence and good feels, because they're not really committing any boots on the ground. Now, this intelligence is allegedly helping Iran target US military positions and radar systems in the region, because Iran at the moment, their intelligence isn't that great because it's all been bombed. Now, one report said that a strike on a US operations site in Kuwait that killed 6 American soldiers was all because of Russian intelligence. Whether or not that's true, or it's just the age-old, Putin bad, I don't know. Now, US officials acknowledged that Russia may be sharing intelligence, but said that it would not alter the war's outcome, because at the end of the day, you can know about all the strikes you're going to get. It's not going to stop you getting struck. You're still going to get bombed into oblivion. Now, talking of bombs, the US State Department has approved an emergency sale of bomb components to Israel worth $151.8 million US. Now, the deal includes approximately 12,000 bomb casing and technical support. And the sale was approved using an emergency waiver that bypassed congressional review. And critics in Congress are arguing that the emergency reflected a crisis partly created by the US policy decisions. Because, contrary to popular belief, as Donald Trump said, he pulled Israel into the war, not Israel pulled him into the war. Now, talking of the ayatollah, the Ukrainian ambassador to South Africa has refused to sign a condolence book at Iran's embassy following the ayatollah's death. Now, if you've watched my last couple of videos, you would have noticed that the South African representative, the Deputy Secretary General, went to go sign the condolence book on behalf of the ANC. Well, the Ukrainian ambassador said, no, they won't do it because they're not going to LARP like the ANC does. Now, he cited Iran's supply of drones to Russia, which have been used in the Ukrainian war, and that whilst Iran has denied involvement in attacks against Ukrainian citizens and blamed NATO and the US for the conflict, their military hardware has been used against the Ukrainian people. And because of that, the ambassador said, do one. Now, because of the ANC's position, they are now facing international criticism over Iran. And this comes after, well, we've done all the stupid things that I've been covering in the videos of recent. Now, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa faces criticism after Iran's embassy said that he had sent condolences for the death of the Ayatollah. Now, US political figures have criticized the message and suggesting that the ANC is just too close to Iran, which does suggest that at some point in time they are going to turn their attention to South Africa. Now, Israel's foreign ministry also mocked the statement publicly around this condolences said to Iran. Now, as you know, this controversy follows previous events such as Iran's participation in the South African Simon Towns naval exercises, which Iran had to leave after the first day. You will recall I've covered that in videos. Now, as we've been talking about Russia, we should probably mention that South Africa's Deputy International Relations Minister has dismissed allegations that Russia interfered in South Africa's elections. And this comes after we are starting to hear allegations out of the Democratic Alliance that Russia is interfering with South Africa's election. So basically, we're like the US now. In any case, this follows an investigation which reported that Russian intelligence had funded influence campaigns across Africa, and that South Africa was allegedly amongst the top 3 targeted countries. Now, remember that South Africa and Russia are very closely intertwined. Now, reports say that 122 million rand was spent on propaganda operations designed to damage opposition parties, specifically the Democratic Alliance. Now, the ANC government has said that South Africa maintains neutral foreign relations, even though it is now emerging because of our relationships to Iran and to Russia that potentially that might not be true. And I hear all of you give a gasp or shock, like as shocked as Cyril Ramaphosa is. I mean, the rest of us are just like, yeah, this sounds about right. Now, as there is this war going on, it's important to understand that shipping is being disrupted globally. Now, the conflict in the Middle East is disrupting key shipping routes, including the shipping route through the Red Sea, which is that 33-kilometer little cross where ships go through by Iran. Now, major shipping companies have reported disruptions, and some vessels are now rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope. So what this should really be doing is benefiting South Africa immensely. It's important to recognize that this isn't the first time this has happened. We've previously seen instances where ships have come via South Africa and really should have benefited us before, specifically when the Houthis were bombing all the ships. Now, this detour adds up to 14 days to shipping time. So shipping companies won't do it willingly, but it does cause damage to the ships themselves, and the ships do need to stop off for refueling purposes and repair purposes, and that should mean that South Africa should see an increased traffic in South Africa, which means that we should have an economic gain. However, due to port inefficiencies, that's not going to happen, with many shipping companies actually avoiding stopping in South Africa, despite South Africa being the logical point where they stop. Instead, neighboring ports are actually going to benefit more. So yet again, ANC mismanagement of the state means that the state will not benefit in the time when it should. Now, as we've all talked about the ANC, perhaps the ANC will actually commit some troops to help poor old Iran. I mean, with troops like these, how could they not win? Have a watch. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's the state of our armed forces. In any case, let's move on. Let's move our attention then to Blighty, because if you've been watching any of my videos, you would have noticed that the Green Party itself has been captured by the Islamists. Now, the Green Party is, according to the latest news, basically having a huge influx of Islamists into the party. Now, the purpose of that, the reason that they are capturing the Green Party, is because they want to push something called Zionism is racism. It's basically a campaign where they declare that Zionism is racism. It's important to understand that this idea was originally designed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and the United Nations had previously voted to say that Zionism isn't racism, because the ideas between Zionism and anti-Semitism is like a difference without a distinction. It's the same thing. Now, critics say that the strategy itself basically amounts to political entryism, which effectively means that they're capturing the parties for a political end. Now, the party leadership says that motions debated at their conferences do not automatically become party policy, and this is because the party itself recognizes that the party is being captured by the Islamist vote in order to push anti-Zionist policy changes, and they're trying to stop that. But the reality is, that's not how democracy works. When your party has been infiltrated with a large amount of foreign voters, this is going to happen. And, to be honest, Britain at this point deserves it. Because one of the other things you will know that Britain did is that they recognized the Palestinian state. Wow. Around 20 Labour MPs have urged the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer to apologise and pay reparations to Palestinians. Now, the campaign argues that Britain bears responsibilities for actions during the British mandate in Palestine, and that apparently all the issues right now are due to the Brits. And so an advocacy group has submitted a 400-page legal petition alleging historical wrongdoings and suggests that the British government should fork out billions in reparations. The UK government has not responded, but still could face legal challenges if they refuse to engage. It's important to understand this is what Keir Starmer has brought to the country. But this is also the same Prime Minister who was an advocate and did win the court case that allowed foreign immigrants to claim benefits in the state. So perfectly in fitting with his MO. So back to South Africa, and Helen Zille has launched a campaign to become the mayor of Joburg. Now, she said that the city has deteriorated underneath ANC governance. And to that I say, Helen, every city has deteriorated underneath ANC governance. There aren't any of them that are doing very well. Now, her campaign priorities are restoring water and electricity reliability, repairing roads and infrastructure, creating 200,000 jobs, fighting corruption, professionalizing city administration, and also ring-fencing municipal revenue so service payments fund infrastructure directly and there's less chance of the cadres looting it. Good luck, Helen. You're going to bloody well need it. In a final news article, a senior police officer acted as the head of crime intelligence despite being labelled a national security risk. This from the same government that says all lawful individuals should be stripped of their firearms and only the police should be allowed to have them. Despite the police, the chief of intelligence, being classed as a national security risk. I wouldn't trust these guys with the barge pole. Now, investigators have found that that officer had failed security vetting and lacked property clearance. Still did the job anyway. Allegations include misrepresenting past criminal matters and irregular vetting procedures. Now, the officer remained in the post until being arrested alongside the crime intelligence boss in 2025, thanks to the police capture commissions. Now, questions were raised about how the appointment was approved despite security concerns. Yeah, we all know how that happened. Don't we, ANC? Anyway, that's the news of today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, bye.